Shalom, friends! Welcome to Orange Socks, a podcast celebrating Jewish creativity. I'm your host, Yitzchok Moully, inviting you to join me in exploring the soul of Jewish expression. Shalom, friends. Welcome. I have Lenore Cohen here in studio. So thank you so much for coming out, taking the time to come share you and your work. We've known each other creatively as artists, professionally.
15 years about now.
Is that not long?
We are old. Thank you for having me, first of all. And yes, I would credit the Jewish Art Salon for introducing us and giving us opportunity to chat. And as we were developing professionally, kind of keep track of each other's careers.
Big shout out to the Jewish Art Salon.
Yes, thank you for connecting artists everywhere.
Exactly, absolutely. So you've got a unique, interesting story. I'd like to believe everyone has a unique, interesting story, but you really do have a unique, interesting background. And that has informed your work greatly, as far as I can tell from the sidelines.
My background definitely informs my work, but it's funny, I was thinking about this earlier. I might have expected you would say something like that, like, oh, you've got an interesting story, and I find it funny that most people don't think their own story is interesting. Like, it's just me. I don't know. Is it so interesting? I'm used to it. Like, it's just me. So I don't know that it's interesting, but I could tell you about my background and who I am a little bit.
Yeah,
if it's relevant to the work. I'm Syrian. Come from a very large, tight-knit community where our heritage as Syrian Jews is very relevant to our everyday life. It's something we talk about a lot. Our schools are...
So who was born in Syria in your family? Like
my great-grandfather emigrated here. But what's very unique about this community is it's at once very old and very new.
Right.
Because you have people that emigrated, like my family, in their early 20s, their 1920s, have been in America ever since. And I would say I'm fifth generation. And then you have people who continued emigrating throughout the last 100 years as persecution for Jews in Syria got worse.
Right.
Even as they closed the borders, people snuck out, and there's all kinds of horrible, sad, but redemptive and interesting stories there with people with immigration experience.
You're fifth generation
So I don't know how to count this. Maybe I'm counting wrong. With my great-grandfather, then my grandfather, my father, and then me. So I guess that's fourth. I'm fourth generation.
But you're
my
third generation born in America.
Okay, yeah, I count that.
No,
that's
fine.
I don't know how to count it, but my point is that even though in many communities the connection to the home country kind of frays over time, in my community it's been re-strengthened by every new wave of immigration up to even the early 90s. So I have people that married into my family, for example, that were themselves born in Syria, and I still, growing up, heard a lot of Arabic or had a lot of the traditions and customs from Syria were still very strong presence in my life.
Right.
And
so my mother was born in Egypt.
Yeah.
My grandmother, my mother.
We've spoken about this.
Right. But
I was surprised to discover that.
But that's the thing, that she was kicked out in 56 during the Suez Crisis, and they were refugees, and it was a French colony. They went to France, and kicked out to France, and then eventually emigrated to Australia. But I don't consider myself as an Egyptian Jew. Like, yeah, we have Egyptian heritage. Yeah. It's cool. It doesn't really inform my life, which I feel like I'm missing out on. That's to be honest. I do feel both the Sephardic element as well as the Egyptian element. Mm-hmm. I love it that you and your community, that's so integral to your identity.
Some people were lucky enough that their wanderings were short. You know, we were all kicked out.
Right.
Some people took a direct line to another strong community, emigrated together, and were able to retain those traditions and have it continue to be a part of their family story. Others, like your family, unfortunately, that heritage, which if you think about it, it's a very rich old heritage. There are the earliest recorded presence of Jews in Syria is in the Bible at 2,000 years ago. Adam Soba is mentioned in the Navi when David HaMelech sends Yoav ben Syria into Syria to conquer Adam Soba, which is another name for Halab, Aleppo, where my family is from.
Right.
So that's a 2,000-year history.
Right. Now, obviously, wasn't Eliyahu Navi?
I'm not going to pretend to be.
Okay, but I recall something. Yeah, but Syria is it's neighbors to Israel.
There was a continuous Jewish presence there from that time of conquering that fort in Adam Soba up until the present day, except for some years in the 1500s, I believe, when the city was affected with plague and the Jews ran into the nearby nature, into mountains to wait it out. So until, except for that period, there was a continuous presence Jewish in that city up until 1948. A little bit before, when some people started leaving for economic reasons, till 1948 when they closed the border and say now you can't leave. All kinds of restrictions are placed on Jews. So they had to escape, obviously, because while they were making it impossible to leave, they also made it impossible to stay.
Stay, of course.
This is a whole bigger question,
Right,
but
right.
the reason we're mentioning it is because that cultural heritage, in many ways, was stolen from the people who, sorry to say, like your family, had to
Right, right.
run, hide, do what they could, ended in a roundabout way in some completely far-flung place, cut off from their own community. So while you have these people that lived in a tight, large family structure for thousands, hundreds of years,
Right.
all of a sudden they're out there in the world having to make it on their own. Not everybody was so lucky to go directly to New York, Panama, Mexico, Israel, where there was a growing community already. Some people ended up losing it.
Right, right.
It's great that you know that this is part of your family heritage. It's great that now.
Well, I think how do I communicate it to my children? Or what even is it that I can communicate to my children?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about you. What are you communicating, or is it osmosis?
It's kind of naturally built in for me. I'm lucky in that way. So
Right.
I'm the inheritor of this cultural legacy, and then it's up to me whether I want to perpetuate it in my family or not. For
Right.
me, a lot of it comes into the art that I make is a part of strengthening that connection, or giving a concrete, tangible thing. Because as you fray in time, like what are the things that connect people to the culture? It's the food, the language, the prayer, the mindset almost of how you educate.
Well, the visual
the Torah.
aesthetics.
Well, visual aesthetics, but also deeper than that. What's the worldview and attitude? How do I connect to the outside world? How do I educate my kids in their Judaism alongside the society that I live in? And there's a very unique Sephardic Syrian worldview on that maybe other communities don't share. This
Right,
is
right.
getting to a whole host of other complicated stuff.
How does Judaism or Judaic practice tie into? I mean, the Sephardic community is very, very passionate. That's for sure. I don't know a lot about the Syrian community. You hear things, but.
Well, we could talk about that, or about the art, or about
we're here to talk about art. That's true. No, but
but
understanding your background is very much informs who you are.
And so the question is, how does Judaism, how is
like
it present in
the Syrian identity? You have your Syrian identity, and then you have your Jewish identity.
Well, these things seem to be like you're mentioning them as two separate things, but for us, they are the same thing. Like I grew up identifying, I'm Syrian Jewish. I never even said American, and I didn't think twice about this because if you're in a community of 20,000 people who are all saying this all around you all the time, you don't question. I'm Syrian Jewish. That isn't a contradiction in terms.
Right.
That's just where I'm from. Just like some other people are from Poland or from Germany or from England. So that's just a natural thing, and that shouldn't preclude. Like Syria is home to people of many faiths, or used to be.
But it's not that you're Syrian; you're Syrian Jewish.
Yes, I'm that kind of Jewish.
Right. No,
and there was always a distinction. The distinction, almost for me growing up, was more I'm Syrian Jewish as opposed to the Ashkenazi Jews that are a totally different thing than me. But I didn't. Yeah, it's funny.
Well, also as opposed to just Syrian,
plain
Syrian Arabs or
Syrian. There are Arab Christians, there are Arab Jews, there are Arab Muslims, and that's a misnomer that people don't realize. And that's also part of what I do in my work is like, listen, people don't understand it or are unaware of it, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. So I know it exists because I am it. Like that Venn diagram almost I think about of identities. That's something that in recent years has become more spoken about and popular just in general, this idea of overlapping identities.
Right.
But it's something I didn't define in terms growing up. It was just what we are.
Right.
So when I thought more seriously about, conceptually, what's the point of my art, or what are things that I care about that I want to be speaking about in my art, or making people think about, have conversations about, so the issues that are important to me are like, hey, somebody once hosted me on a podcast years ago and they said, well, what does it feel like being outside of normative Judaism? And I'm like, well for me, this is normal. Like, what does that even...
Right.
And so you think more about that, and like, at one point in history, the Sephardic Jews were the majority of Jews worldwide, and now that's flipped. So in popular culture and even in the Jews' own consciousness, there's this like, this is what Judaism is, and you guys are this other special thing.
Right.
And it's like, no, like that's just your experience. This is my experience. They both exist. They're both truth. They're both rooted in history. They're both valid, and again, that they both exist. Because I never saw myself represented in any kind of pop culture or even Jewish culture. Stuff made specifically even by Jews doesn't represent
within the Jewish culture.
Without, like, any time on TV that you saw a Jewish character, it's like, what's that? I don't identify with that. Like as a kid, it's confusing. Like that's not anything close to touching on my experience as a Jewish person. Like, but okay, that's what people think that we are. It's not baseless because a lot of Jews do act, look, and dress this way, but I completely don't. And so even like when I started creating in Arabic, it's my primary visual language. I don't speak it. People ask me all the time, do you speak Arabic? And this is, the first thing to go with an immigrant community usually, especially when they're trying to be good Americans, is the language. Like we're Americans, we speak English now, that Arabic is considered like the low language. I regret that because now I'm the first generation in my family in 500 to 2,000 years that doesn't speak the language, and that's annoying.
Right.
So practicing in Arabic is a way.
Your parents and grandparents both speak fluently.
So it weakens with each generation, right? My great-grandfather's primary mother tongue was Arabic, and then my grandfather obviously understands and converses much better than I would. My father went and sought it out and learned it in college, so he could strengthen his own connection with it, and probably in his generation he speaks it more than others, although they do still retain more than I do.
Right.
What did I get? Slang, food names, little phrases, and so I studied it in high school because I thought it was important to know the alphabet and start getting a start in it. And it's beautiful visually. So I was drawn to it as an artist, just like this is a part of my heritage, it's part of who I am. I don't really know a lot about it, and I want to study it, go more deeply into it. And the more you do, for me, like the more interested I became, and I never looked back.
Right. So this Arabic belongs to you. It's not. It's not something.
So most people are like, well, why are you creating in Arabic? And I said, well, that's sad to me, or something that needs correcting, that people think that Arabic and Judaism are diametrically opposed, because there are millions of people worldwide who are like quietly just existing, people who, came from Egypt, Lebanon, Morocco, Syria, all these countries, and their grandparents, very much like mine, culturally are, like maybe they want to admit it or not, to different degrees, they are as well as American or Australian or French, whatever their new heritages, they are also Arab. Come from an Arab country, and that runs deep. So rather than negate it or try and erase it, I take a look at the work that I do as just like I'm going to stand in that spot. I'm going to remind people that this exists and that it's important. Maybe I'm not making a direct comment on the culture. I'm just perpetuating it so that people shouldn't forget it exists, and that's enough.
Well, I mean, draw the parallel to English, and English is what an English language or an American language. Like, you're it's just part of your identity. So it's been part of your family identity, and it's equally Jewish as English is Jewish. It's just a.
Yeah, but I think that specifically because of current events in the last 100 years of relations between Arabs and Jews, it becomes this much more touchy thing of like, people look at Arabic and it's this lightning rod for thinking like, I've done street art in Jerusalem in Arabic, and people get scared. It makes them scared.
Well, they don't know what it is.
What does it say? We kill the Jews? Does it say? And
it's other.
I have this interesting story that happened. I was on a residency in Jerusalem, and we were meant to do street art, so I made this whole pathway of murals leading from the Shuk Machaneh Yehuda to Ades, the synagogue, the Syrian synagogue in Nachlaot, historic. So it's like this pathway leading you from like the present day, where a lot of the merchants in the shuk are themselves of this heritage, maybe not Syrian specifically, but Arab descent, and Jews, going to the traditional synagogue, where they're known throughout Israel for their like deep love and perpetuating of the chazanut that is specifically Syrian, that we're known for the musicality. That's like maybe the primary cultural export of the community is the singing, the songs, the liturgy.
Right.
All the best chazanim in Israel train in Ades. Anyway, I made this pathway, and it was all drawing from Arabesque motifs, and I had Arabic phrases that I worked into the like text with imagery. All the phrases came from my community. It was popular, interesting idioms that they had used in Syria and now were out of use. So it was like this whole nice kind of connection, heritage thing, old and new. People saw it and they got taken aback, and there was I would do my work, and then on the street, and it would spark conversations between the passersby. So this woman comes up to me, and she's obviously of this descent. Like, you can tell in Israel if somebody is of Mizrahi descent like myself, or if they're Ashkenazi, and she starts getting really upset by it. Well, what are you doing? And so occasionally explaining to her what it is, and like a Russian guy passing by, Russian Jew, he tells her in Hebrew, ve'atma, is a popular phrase in Hebrew, like, and you are. Like, don't throw stones. Like, what, you're so upset by this thing being displayed, but like, and what are you? Like, what half of Israel is of this descent? And
do you think this? I mean, she was an older lady. Do you think she could read it? Could you read it and understand
because, again, these have a really tangled history with the Arab Jews that came to Israel and the treatment that they received upon entering, and whether it was self-directed in some cases because they just wanted to join the rest of the society and not be ostracized. Look, the Arabs in Israel are the enemy. the Muslims, like
Right,
they're viewed
right,
as like a threat. And
right.
so if you were a Jewish person that's speaking Arabic coming in, well, a lot of times they were forced to give up their culture and forget it.
So to her, it was a lot more, it was
You look
triggering,
at it, it's
so to
triggering,
speak, a horrible
yeah, and it's
word,
like
but,
they worked maybe for the last 50 years or 60 years to erase that association,
and now you're
which
bringing
I
it
don't
in.
fault them for because you have to
Right,
do what you have to do to survive, and you have a unique set of conditions, and that's your story, and it's regrettable in my eyes, but that's a whole other political thing.
right,
So you've worked for 60 years to disassociate from this so you won't be discriminated against and you won't be treated as a second-class citizen. And
right.
so then up comes me going like, well, this is who we are, and
Put it in
here
your
it
face.
is. And it's rankling, even when they do understand that it's a Jewish pride thing,
Right,
well, stop that. I've had people
right.
tell me, well, why are you creating in Arabic? Nobody wants to see that. No one wants to see what you're making in Arabic. And why is that like, people just don't get it. So
Right.
that makes me just want to do it more.
Well, yeah, what motivated you from the beginning to go in this direction? Or did you have this internal struggle yourself? Or this was just a natural, Arabic is,
Arabic
you're
is
so
me.
comfortable with it.
Yeah,
It's part of
I
your,
was raised in it. Thankfully, like my parents are really into heritage and education, knowing your roots and where you come from. And so this was something we spoke about in my house a lot. Maybe not specifically about the Arabic, it was just part of my upbringing. So it was very natural for me.
right,
And that's why I find it such a shame because it's such a rich, beautiful culture,
right,
and that we are a part of that culture, or we
right,
were.
right,
And now the rest of the world decided that we can't have that anymore. Well, I
right,
don't agree,
right.
and this is who I am, so why should I be apologetic about that? And
Yeah,
if somebody else's ignorance prevents them from appreciating and enjoying it, then that's not my problem.
right, right. But I mean,
So,
part of art is that it's a dialogue with the public.
yeah.
And one of the worst things that I get as a response to my art is, oh, that's nice.
Mm,
Like, oh, that's sweet. It's
mm,
like, I'm not making visual elevator music.
right.
You want a response, whether it's positive or negative. I much prefer
I'm trying to
a
make you think about
I want
something.
someone to respond in anger rather than going, oh, that's pretty.
Right.
Like, and
Because
then just
that's
move.
dismissive. Whereas if I spent all this time working on something, and this could be hundreds of hours working on it, even something small like this,
Right.
you want someone to linger on it for more than 30 seconds
So
and actually
you're getting
think about
responses.
it. Thank God. Yeah. Yes, it has done that. That tension point has done that. But I think, even beyond the cultural thing, that finding that tension point,
Right.
something to look at and make art about, whether you're making your own statement about how you feel about the issue or not, is something I try to do in my work. I want to look at things that are a contradiction in terms,
Right.
even leaving the cultural stuff to the side, because I've kind of moved beyond. Like that was the start.
Right.
So I'm always going to create in Arabic because that's who I am, and like that's my jumping off point from which to think about other things. I'm not always making art about heritage. In the beginning, I did. I used old vintage photographs from the community. I used Arabic words talking about cultural decay or fraying and connections being severed. But I've moved past that as well in my work. I'm not going to work on one thing my whole career. Maybe some people could, but I
Right.
can't. Um, I just try and look at things that, if I'm making art about emotional health or daily struggles, life struggles, things that are important to me or that I go through, and maybe they're universal because other people in their own way have dealt with these things or are interested in looking at these things. So I'm trying to find a tension point and things that are contradictory to each other or seem to be a contradiction, but one can't exist without the other. For example, I don't know if you could see clearly this artwork that I have
Yeah,
here.
let's lift it up. Let's show it to the camera.
Very funny. This is called Hope and Despair.
I mean, so I've seen these online, and
Yeah.
I told you I wanted to see it in person. I mean,
You
this is
totally cannot
the
appreciate
the
online
intricacies.
what's going on
Yeah,
here.
we'll have to link to a photo of this, but
Yes, or like some
intricacies are
close-ups.
incredible.
Thank you. So people have told me it looks like moss, and that's like the dismissive thing. I'm like, no, 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 it's not moss, it's not Spanish moss. Each one of these flowers, and there are hundreds of them on here. This is a bunch of flowers that I sculpted out of, basically it's handwritten Arabic calligraphy that I
Wow.
do first in a black and white ink drawing by hand. And then I'll take a word that is just like a simple noun like hope, despair, something that might be, I'm meditating on this because something's happening in my life to do with this, and I'll pick pairs of words that are part of a cycle together. You can't have hope without despair. You can't have despair without hope. And then I'll try and create a structure that talks about like what are the nature of these things. So I think hope is usually very deep. It's green. It springs eternal. It will keep renewing itself, even as despair, which is in the beige here, will like leach hope out.
Oh,
And so it's
wow.
this interplay between, well, which one is winning out here? I can't really tell. Is the outside encroaching in? Is the inside growing out? Which one's going to take over? Are they a cycle that's just constantly present? So, this isn't about heritage specifically. It's still in the vein because I'm creating in Arabic, but now I'm moving on to these issues of like, let's take pairs of words that are expressing an idea that I care about because it's important or it gets to the heart of something in the human experience. I have others called Control Chaos. I have a series of 5 of them like in a dome shape that I've got in a show in the JCC this September that are specifically talking about the Hamza. It's a show about Hamza. So it's talking about superstitions in general. What are people doing when they use amulets and superstitious objects? What are they trying to do? I took it as that. So I have these 5 pairs of contradicting words like controlling chaos, like usefulness or futileness. Like, is it something correct or incorrect? What does Judaism want us to do with this evil eye stuff? Right. Is this Judaic or is this just superstition? Is it useful? Is it futile? We're trying to form this armor of protection around ourselves in a world that you really can't control.
Right.
So there's, again, a tension point. So they're all exploring that. And I try to make the structure of these.
So this is titled Hope.
This is Hope and Despair. So these green inside is the word hope scripted, and then I cut them out, I paint them, and I weave them each one by hand with wire.
Right, I can see.
So it cinches them to make this nice 3D
shape. Is there a number of how many hopes there are and how many despairs there are?
That'd be getting a little crazy. It's already a super involved process.
To me, numbers also play a role in.
I did it till I felt like there was enough of it. Like we're in this transition where we're in this little cave, this little like flame you're keeping alive on the inside, and it's coming out into the outside. It's got to start transitioning to what is external, is the despair.
So there is more numbers of despair than hope, right? I imagine, but yet.
I mean, people don't realize artists have to think about practical stuff when they make this stuff too, right? I can't be giant. I'm a small person. I got to be carrying around these things on my own, shipping them off to shows. That's unfortunately a part of the practical considerations. I've started working small scale because I feel like it lets me get an idea out and create it quicker. Because like I can talk about all my ideas from here to tomorrow, but I don't have a physical representation of them, then they're not going to get put in that show. They're not going to get talked about.
So what's this piece titled?
This is Understanding. And this one's a little bit of a different process. Instead of creating a whole flower in calligraphy, I just simply did the word fahem, understanding, in singular.
Right.
Cut those out and paint them. I wove each petal with that wire twist and then twisted them together to make this very anthropomorphic looking but natural looking wire sculpture. And the use of wire in these, it goes back to the first iteration. I did a bouquet of these in Israel. It was like post-COVID, and I was taking words that were themes in my life at the time, like burdens that you carry, struggles that you have to deal with, and things that are ever present but won't go away, maybe things that can have a dual nature, like even the word love. Right? If I love and care about something, that it can also cause me pain, because if I didn't care, then whatever happened with it, it wouldn't bother me.
Right.
So even love in its own ways is that burden. So I called it the bouquet of burdens. It sold almost immediately, I guess. Everybody was feeling this during COVID, but that idea of even using a flower is so important to these recent works that I've done, because I think flowers in art are very symbolic of, life and youth and carefree and beauty, but they're also a symbol at the same time of death. Again, that opposites contradiction in terms, because they're transient, because they're not going to last. And especially using wire and shaping these and making these like very pointed leaves and thorns as part of the structure. In Hebrew, the word pogea, like it's hurting you, it's poking into you. It's like not this delicate, soft beauty thing. It's not natural.
Right.
It's synthetic and it hurts. It's wire, it hurts to make them. So all of that contained within this one little thing. That's what I'm always trying to do with my work.
So there's a dichotomy within here.
Dichotomy, and I want to bring it out in the work, but in this visual that will take the ideas I'm thinking about, all these disparate things, and then sum them up in one succinct whole. Not always so easy. So.
And then visually, as artists, we want our work to sell, but someone can appreciate it just visually as, this is beautiful.
Yeah.
Not knowing any of the underlying layers.
Yeah, I think that's
and not necessarily do you want to sell it to someone who only sees, this is pretty. Going back to that, you hope that they have a deeper understanding. I remember I don't know, it's from a movie somewhere but comics, it's a comic artist, a very serious comic artist. And someone came into the store and said, oh, I need something for my 3-year-old's bedroom. Oh, I like that. And he refused to sell it. It's like, no, that's not decoration. That's not for a 3-year-old bedroom. This is serious art. And yet.
So it's always a tension for artists. Like people want it, could you make it in green? Because my whole living room is green. So let's just make it like that. And it's like, well, art supplies are expensive and I'd like the validation of selling something. So then, yes, I suppose I can do that for you, of course, because you need to be accommodating to your clientele. Otherwise, you're not going to have an art practice, unfortunately, unless you're of means on your own. We know the art industry is full of people like this. The people who are already successful, those are the people who have really successful art careers. Good on you. So that's important. But yeah, at the same time, like, then you'll get the person who's like, well, why am I going to buy that from you for, several $1,000s when I can go to Marshall's and get it for $50? And it's like, well, because I'm not a factory in China, and this has a deeper conceptual meaning, and you either connect with that or you don't. And
to people like that, I say yes, please.
Please
by
go
all
ahead
means,
and do that. Yes.
This is not for you.
Well, the thing is, though, you touch on this. Why am I making it aesthetic? It's not only because I wanted to sell. It's also because, like, me as an artist, I have that personally. That's my sensibilities. I like making things of worth of beauty, and not the things that aren't beautiful aren't worthy. But I do think that there's a challenge with conceptual art. You also need an audience. If you want people to be thinking about and talking about certain concepts that are important to you, which is the point of doing conceptual art, if it's off-putting, I think so. Like, this is a vein, obviously branches out in many different ways.
They need
how
an entry
artists will
point.
take this.
They need an entry point.
But there is like a whole section of contemporary art that is conceptual, and it goes so deeply into the conceptual that is off-putting, and people don't want to spend time meditating on it, or most people don't. And I think you lose audience, you lose conversation that way, and that's not useful for me. So I do try to keep a balance between aesthetics and the concept. There should be a way to do both. If you're not being, for me, I'm like, your own task driver. Because if you're an artist and you're self-employed, well, I could just stop. But one thing I try to always do is not get lazy about it.
Right.
And if I step back from the work and I look at it and I'm like, just because it's about something good doesn't mean that it's good.
Right.
I think it was Jeffrey Deitch that said that.
Okay.
That kind of sticks with me. You could have a really solid concept, and you've, I'm sure, experienced this. Like, this concept is great. It's so important. It really resonates with people, and I got to make something about it. And then you step back and you're like, well, it's just not that good, though.
Right. No, so recently I had something, the concepts were so perfect, but just then the physical materials wouldn't play the concept game. Like, it was between light and shadow and sun and
that's a struggle. So some people could just give up and ignore it and put it to the side, and it's not a struggle. And like, I'm going to put up, like Duchamp, I'm going to put up the urinal. But like, I'm not going to do that because like, he's done that. That's done. I don't get to pull back on that anymore 100 years later. Like, we got to, there's the hours and the physical toil in it. Like
right. So there's tremendous detail in your work. That's for sure. There's tremendous,
Do you think this is? I have one that I just finished before I moved out of my last studio. Was working in a frenzy to finish because I didn't want all my components to just go into storage. This sort of one that's like covered in like a carpet of them with this under structure with the wire, and it's doing all these bumping wave cave shapes. I've got one that I made with 2,000 flowers on it. Wow. It's 48 by 48 inches.
Huge.
So it's like almost the size of a person. It's really huge.
Yeah.
I don't usually work so large.
Right.
It was a challenge getting it in the car.
And minivans, you should know, minivans. The well is 48 wide.
Yeah,
and you can get, if there's no kids in the back, you can get at least.
Kids, definitely. I should be having a minivan, but I don't think I've quite accepted the minivan lifestyle yet. I got an SUV where.
I love my minivan.
So cool.
I can transport so much art, and occasionally it fits kids also.
Yes, on top of each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I had been working on this installation of these flowers. Started like I said in COVID, it grew from there like a mental health thing, and I was taking words that I was struggling with or dealing with that were presence in my life, and I had this idea of making a whole room that could be completely carpeted in these, and the wire structure that's doing these shapes is in the air, so you could be walking around immersed in it, and it would almost leave it. The way I picture it is that making a path that a viewer would walk through that's very choked with flowers. Maybe there are objects in the space that are totally blanketed, and I'm like, it's this growth of colonizing, enroaching nature. Could be good, could be bad. It's choking you out. It's this symbiosis of like, am I my problems or my problems me? Am I talking about them too much? Are they a crutch? Have they become me to the point where I can't disentangle from them? So I was in that studio for 2 years, and this installation was growing on the ceiling, on the walls, and when, okay, it's an idea in the
So
future, maybe it
but you were
will.
doing it. I mean, you were.
You have to make this is the crackpot crazy artist thing. Like you have this crazy cool thing that you think about. It would be great if I had a gallery or museum asking me to do it so I felt like I'm not a nut job
Right.
for spending two
Right.
years making that. But until I make it, they're not going to ask me for it because I
They
just
don't even know.
invented it. They don't know
They
what
don't
it
know it
is.
exists.
You've got to
Absolutely.
make it.
Right.
So I made it, and now it's on the ceiling. And I was moving out of my studio, and I said, well, stuff is either going to go in boxes or I'll take these components and I will work them into a physical portable artwork like this one. I'd done a
Right.
few smaller scale, and I was like, all right,
So
we don't, yeah,
that's what became the 48.
yes.
Right.
So
Okay.
it's like the culmination of 2 years of work, and it's like, in this frame like this, like a sellable object,
Right.
not so much the installation thing, but I got so many photos of it like that now I think, okay, the concept is there, and at such
They
time that it
can.
would be asked for by a specific arts group, then we can get to working on that.
Right.
Like it's okay, it had its
So
time.
if I can ask, like, would you use digital, like, in terms of this? I have this theory, this working theory of there's three basic elements to all expression. There's what you say, there's how you say it, and how you share it with the world, what you do with it afterwards. So we've discussed what you say, the heritage, working through all these dichotomies, but how you say it is you're using paper cut at the moment. Are you, pure is the wrong word, but are you so, like, would you, especially this installation
scale,
on
yeah.
a large scale, would you employ laser cut, like, to get it, or will
So
you
I've been looking into
are
all
you
the things.
determined to cut everything by hand because that's
So
art
we'll
of?
correct the misnomer. I'm like not actually insane. I did the first bouquet that I made and sold was the only one that I cut completely by hand, and it did
Okay.
take months just to make these like 5 flowers that were in it. It was a really delicate process, and if you slip the knife one time, it is destroyed. You got to repair it, disguise it. It wouldn't be possible to think big and make thousands of individual components like that cutting by hand unless you had an army of studio assistants,
Right.
which,
You're
if
not
anyone's
there.
interested in supporting that, please buy my work and we will continue
You're
pay
not
it forward
quite there
and employ
yet.
some people. But the digital stuff is a tool. It's an aid. I'm not overly reliant on it. All of my things start out as a hand drawing, and I pull from that only. I don't use digital drawing techniques. It
Right.
doesn't work for me. I like the physicality of ink and paper and like traditional methods, and I think that hand touch comes through in the work regardless because it has that foundation. If I want to be thinking in terms of thousands of components, I have to use something digital. But even then, it's so process heavy. You can't do laser cut with these because laser cut uses a laser. It gets really hot. And if
For
you've got,
burns or
yeah, so if you have paper that's like if you zoomed in on this, you would see that there's something that's like a hair thick. It's a millimeter thick.
oh wow.
The laser cutter can't handle that because it'll
Right.
burn the
But you
material.
could find potentially other tools that could.
So I like a Cricut machine out of all things. It's like this crafters, like it's like
Yeah,
so
mine
is
is.
you
Mine
have
too.
one.
I have one here
It's
too.
marketed to like PTA moms, like make stickers and
Right.
banners and things on your water bottles, but like you can, like a creative person will take a tool and find other uses for it.
Sure,
So
sure.
I think artists everywhere are quietly using it, but it's still, so it's a really process heavy thing because you've got this material that you're feeding into the machine. You first have to digitize your drawings, make it into a file format that the machine can even read. Now I have to put my material in to be
You got to
cut,
feed them in one at a
and
time.
you got to lift it off the mat. You have all this negative space pieces that you have to. It's
Remove.
physical work. You got to remove them all. Is it sticky now? I got to spray it. It's like it's a very finicky process.
Right.
And now I'm peeling off. They still can rip and rip. I have like almost I think of it as a fail rate. Like I know if I'm cutting,
Right.
300 flowers, probably like 80 of them will just have to end up in the garbage. And so like this rate of attrition, like you still have to keep at it. And now I've lifted off this delicate thing. I still have to paint it, that I do by hand, and then I still have to wrap it in the wire. That's got to be by hand. I still have to twist these components together, pin them on, make these underwire structures that they're in. So it's, even though I am relying on digital for one part of this process, my hand is still on every single
Right.
piece.
Sure. Sure.
And I'm bringing it to that final thing. Like it's just not, it doesn't lend itself to digital. It's a physical thing.
Right. Let me ask you a horrible question, and I think the answer is yes. But is it worth it? Like, at what point, you say, okay, because I have ideas, and they're just
Yeah.
either too expensive or too labor intensive, or like
I don't know.
I'll veer to other ideas that excite me more, that
Right.
there's less labor intensive,
There's a few
you know.
components to make something worth it. And I
Right.
identified early on, like, every artist starts out like, hey, this could be a business. I can sell this and so I can work in what I like
Well,
and then I'll sell it and that'll be worth it.
well, let me reframe. Worth it
Yeah.
is not, it wasn't a financial question.
No, no, no,
Worth
I
it
know, I
is to
know.
you
I'm saying how
creatively.
I arrived at this different definition is
Okay.
that you realize very quickly that with the amount of time it takes to make anything that you really care about and that is worth selling, even if they give you your asking price, there's no way it's going to be equivalent to the hours of work that you put in. So is it worth it? Has to become a question of, do I love what I'm doing? Even the physical act of doing it in that moment. If I'm going to invest hundreds of hours into doing something and someone's going to compensate me for the equivalent of like 10% of that time,
Right.
was that time well spent in my life as a human being?
Right.
That's one. Am I making work about things that I care about? And then did they resonate with others, or did I get other people looking at things I care about? That's another component that makes it worth it. So it's being on shows like this, I don't know who it'll reach, and thank you. That helps
Oh,
make it
absolutely.
worth it. I'm lucky enough to have gotten validation recently from museums that will show the work. So again, it's not a
Yes. Yes. Tell me
financial,
about that. I saw
yeah,
some.
it's not a financial remuneration really, but it's also like another validation of like, yeah, that's worth it because now I didn't just make this thing and it's hiding on them. And not that I'm doing it for the validation. I'm doing it because I care about this thing and I want other people to care about it or think about it for 5 minutes. So it's not hiding under my bed or in storage somewhere in the basement. It's actually out there in the world. It's traveling around. And that what more worth it could there be? Like that I'm spending all my time making things I care about and then getting to share it with other people. Would it be worth it if I didn't have those successes in my career? I don't know. I'm happy I don't have to answer that question.
Right.
I've been at this long enough and I've learned consistency and persistence. So eventually, like if you're making good work, it should land
Right.
somewhere where it's appropriate. I don't know how I would answer that question if I wasn't in
Right.
that position, but thankfully in the last couple of years, yeah, it's coalesced to give me that platform. So yeah, it's worth
It's worth it. Thank God.
it.
The world is, I believe the world's better because of all of our art.
Yes,
So tell me about some of these museum shows. Where are your,
sure. So in a big way, it's funny. It's like all artists have this thing where it's like I'm making such great stuff, but it's not ending up in the right places where I want it to be because there's that missing component that we all know, that like kismet of who did I meet? Did they also like it? Who do they know? What are these connections? And like
sure.
that tension between the time I need to spend in the studio or maybe running my personal life, like hi, 3 kids, and going out to art things and networking all the time and meeting other artists and getting to know their work and letting them get to know your work and like hoping the more connections I make, then it'll just magically work out. It's
Right.
a
There's
lot
so
of,
much
yeah,
more than just making a
just
piece in
making
the
the thing.
studio.
Yeah, because you got
Absolutely.
to do all these jobs. You have to
Yes.
be a
Yes.
production
Yes.
team
Yes.
and advertiser. Like, right, you have to learn
Got
how
to set
to
up your own
do podcasts.
podcast.
Right, exactly. So it's like now after being at this for 15 years, I can take the long view, look back and say like, oh, now I see how all those little seeds I planted, how they came together to get me to this point and give me those opportunities. It is that tension between, or like not tension, just like an interplay between how prepared was I for the opportunity and what did I do to help create that
Right.
opportunity, or how lucky did I get? It's like the three things, serendipity also playing a part. Did I get lucky enough to have that opportunity come my way and was I prepared to meet it when it
Well,
did?
you've been in the the Jerusalem
Biennale.
Biannual multiple times,
Yes. So
and you've had
right. I would
solo
credit,
show. I mean,
yeah, so
you've
this is what I was going to start to say is I would credit definitely my time in Israel and the institutions that I worked with there with helping me with the connections that I have now professionally. I don't know, it was like almost like a college campus for me in a way because
so you made Aliyah.
yeah,
How long were you in Israel?
I lived there for 3 years with
3
my
years.
family.
All
And
before COVID?
yes, well, we moved 6 months before it happened.
Oh God.
Yeah, I thought for many years, even before I moved, that I would be moving. So a lot of my professional connections that I worked to make were based in Jerusalem. And I always had this like great sense that if you do good work, then the Jewish world is small and it's big and it's small at the same time.
Right.
Especially in Israel, there's this kibbutz galuyot, like the ingathering of the exiles factor, where you can meet anybody in the art world there, and they themselves come from somewhere else. So, for example, a curator I met through doing a show with the Jerusalem Biennale 2 cycles ago is herself Italian, and
Okay.
so the museum that I'm showing with in Italy now, she works with them. So that's
Right.
like something
Right.
that uniquely Israeli, like that wouldn't have
Right.
happened if or very unlikely to have happened if I had met her in New York. She would maybe have been another New Yorker like me, and we'd
Right.
be doing our small pop-up shows and trying to make stuff happen here. And it's like, well, that's her story now. I got to interact with that. that happened because I was in Israel.
Right.
The Jerusalem Biennale and also Studio Michelach, studio of her own. I have to really give them both a lot of credit because
Right. So you did a residency there.
not quite. So
You did a residency somewhere.
I don't know how like
or...
interesting this is for people, how involved you want me to get with like my story journey as an artist of like how I made my connections.
Well, yeah, part of this podcast is to
How do we do
have
this?
great conversations, and how do we do this? To
Okay.
share with other creatives,
So-
what part of the process is, and
Yeah. I'm always aware, like, am I monologuing? Am I talking too much about that? I don't know if people care, but okay. So rewinding, like in the early part of my career, I had 2 kids at the time. The Jerusalem Biennale was just starting out, so I was in its second cycle, and the founder, Rami Ozeri, came to New York to sort of publicize what it is they're trying to do over there. What's our new idea? What's the whole concept of making a specifically Jewish biennial? What is this all about? Why should it be in Jerusalem? And why are we focused specifically on Jewish work, not necessarily Jewish artists, but work that is within the umbrella of Jewish themes?
sure.
At that time, or at any time in your career, there's a myriad of events going on in the city, especially any night of the week. And it's hard to get to all of them, so you need to be selective about what you can get to. And it's almost like so much of a pressure put on every event, especially as a mom. Like, it's hard to get out and be at somewhere on time when it's starting. And so I'm almost big time FOMO. You have to
Yes.
tell yourself, like,
Yes.
okay, there will always be another opportunity.
Yes.
You don't have to be at everything. But then you have to be really selective and think ahead of time, like, well, is this going to be worth it, or is that not going to be worth it? And it becomes like, I was just like, you know what, this just seems really cool. I don't know what's going to come of it. I'm just going to go. Like, I feel like this is something I should be at, and I'm just going to go and hear about this info session. And,
Right.
it's really compelling. You made the case for why there has to be a Jewish biennial. There are so many Jewish artists around the world, and there's not really any one institution that gives a spotlight to them. And that really spoke to me because I was a person from a traditional community. In my neighborhood, there is no framework for professional artists to make connections, show their work. None of that. Everything I do, I had to make up on my own.
Right.
Go out and search it for it. It wasn't like I'm living in Williamsburg or Bushwick where you walk down the block and there's 10 galleries. You throw a rock and you'll hit one. Like,
Right. Right.
where do you want to be affiliated with, or who do you have an affinity with? And just go
Right.
hang out there because it's right there. It's so easy for you to get there. Like, no, I had none of that. I'm living deep in South Brooklyn. Anytime I've been going into the city, it's an hour at least before I can get to something.
Right.
It's really a struggle and challenge. And at that time in my career, it was a struggle to see even, well, what's the ceiling for this? Where can I go? Who's looking at my Jewish themed artwork? Why is that interesting to anybody? Who's giving it a platform? Almost nobody that I could see, maybe because I didn't know enough yet, but also
Right.
because like this big machine, in a good way, machine that Rami created it wasn't fully fledged yet.
Right.
And seeing that there was the seeds of this starting, like, that's interesting. That's exciting.
What
I'll
year-
get on
what
board
year
that
was this?
train. 2013, I want to say. I think so. It's about a decade ago already by this
Right.
point.
Right.
The first time I applied, they wanted you to get a group of artists together, have a curator, and apply as a finished show. Like, if we
Right.
gave you a venue as part of our biennial satellite location in Jerusalem, what would you do with it? So, look to the people I know as other Sephardic Syrian artists. Can we get together a group like this and talk about these kind of issues? It was not really organized yet.
Right.
For people in their career, were like very early career, maybe the ideas were, I don't want to say half baked, but like not totally developed yet to the point where it's like this is deserving of international
Ready
attention.
to-
It's not
right.
ready. It's really good clay though.
Right.
And Rami helped
Right.
me to see that, and
Right, well,
being
just-
rejected is a good thing sometimes. Is that what you're about to say?
No. Well,
Yeah.
that also, but no, that he planted the seed of what is possible.
Yeah, big time.
So you weren't there the first time around. You got rejected, which is
First, I had
but-
never even heard of it. It was a small local thing the first
Right,
time, and then they
right.
wanted to expand internationally because it's like we have something special here. So that first international one, I did get together a group and we applied, and we were not accepted. They have a board that looks at all these things. I'm sure they got hundreds of applications from around the world, so it made sense. We were not. It wasn't compelling enough yet. But it was definitely like an inspirational, like, hey, so come back in 2 years and show us what you can do. And it was like
and that gave you time to
yeah.
develop that.
And so I did take that time to make connections with people outside of my own community, but who are also working on these issues of, like, at the time I was heavy focused on the effect of forced migration on communities. So as we mentioned, the Syrians were not the only one who this was done to. There are Yemenites and Moroccans and Persians and Tunisians. So this was also part of their family heritage and history.
Sure.
And I said, we should get together a show.
And Europeans.
Yeah, well, yeah.
They weren't spared that.
But
Yes, but you were focused on that.
That's really very much in the public eye,
Right.
and something that everyone, like, when they think about Jewish history, that's what they think about. But
Sure,
it's like,
so you're
hey,
telling
remember
the rest
these,
of the story.
850,000 people that were disenfranchised and completely had all their property robbed from them and their cultural heritage almost erased from public consciousness because of this thing. Like, no one even thinks about Arabs and Jews and, like, about Jews existing in Arab lands. It's like a what? It's like that's a contradiction in terms to people,
Right.
which is crazy
Right.
for me. So I said, it would be great to get together a group of artists that are making work about this, that have this in their family, have history, and are creating work reacting to this. Because like now you're the cultural inheritor here of this thing.
Yeah.
What do you do with it? Are you thinking about it, making work about it? I'm interested in that. I got together the artists. I got linked up with a curator based in Israel, which was important because there's a lot of stuff that has to get done on the ground.
Sure.
Mirav Ballas, she works at the Tel Aviv Anu Museum in Tel Aviv. So that was helpful, having somebody on the ground. And we applied, and we had people from, I think, 9 different countries send their work. And this was crazy. It was like almost when you're naive and you don't know what you're getting yourself into, that's when you could do really good stuff. Because if I knew, I would not have done it.
Yes.
Wild things. Like I'm waking up at 3 a.m. to talk using Google Translate to an Italian boatman in Venice because one of our sculptures was stuck in Venice from a biennial, and he's supposed to be delivering it to the curator who also happened to be there and is now going to bring it to Israel. And here I am, like I don't even know what I'm saying. It's 3 a.m, our time. It's like, how did I get here? I'm pregnant now to here with my second. I'm just like, I like wild stuff, like really fun. A lot of great experience learning about the production side of being in a show, because I was basically the creator and the producer as well as showing in it. And I designed our catalog, and I had to deal with insurance and shipping and all this like back end stuff that helps you to understand the machinations of how this all works.
Sure.
Which is so valuable. So I just did that firsthand, and I'm really grateful to the biennial for giving us that platform and taking a chance on us. And I think by all accounts, this is a really successful show. And okay, that's another step towards making more professional connections in the city, which I think I'm going to live in, right?
Right.
At the same time, Tzipi Mizrahi she had founded Studio Mishelach, studio of her own. It's the first and only women's artist collective in Israel. At that time, they were operating out of a bomb shelter, but she had these big dreams of like, we should have a building where we can have a gallery, a performance space, a workspace, and be a hub, a gathering point for women artists, and a platform for them to work on whatever it is that's important to them. And people from all stripes, Haredi, non-religious, Dati Lomi, Muslim, like it doesn't matter. Every woman artist will have a place here.
Wow. And
they even had a residency program that they, again, I'm a young artist. I want to do residency programs, but I have kids. I can't just like up and leave. And she put this thing out, found her maybe from Googling. We want to have a residency program that is friendly to mothers with children. You can come and bring your child, and we'll provide childcare. And I was like, this is crazy, because like I couldn't have made it up better myself. And it actually exists, and it's the only place that exists. So at the time that I was in Jerusalem for the Homelands was the name of the show that I produced, I also met with her. And like, again, that was another seed. I didn't move to Israel for another few years after that. But once I did, she actually, Tzipi was granted a building by the municipality in Jerusalem.
Incredible.
It's a historic artist house by Litvinovsky. Lived there, died there in the 80s, and it was just totally untouched from then until right before COVID when I moved. So it was like this really good timing. It was like all this, living in a traditional community without an artistic framework and all that, and now coming to live in a big city, and here's this new artistic hub that's being expanded, and here's a workroom, and you can pay a very reasonable fee for having your studio here. And I owe her a huge debt also, because how great was it for me to just, again, like luck favors the prepared. Like here I am doing my thing in my studio, and she's doing her thing, trying to build up her creative hub. So she's got museum curators and gallerists and artists and people just all coming through. And it's like, even if I'm not even there that day because I got to go deal with something at Ghana or whatever, it's like, well, there's my stuff.
Right.
The head of the American Embassy Cultural Affairs branch bought that bouquet of burdens that I was talking about earlier because she passed through the space and she saw it and it resonated with her, and like connections, and it just mushrooms out.
Right.
So
having a creative community is
so important.
And
I have none where I am, or almost none. It's like a loose organization of people that are independently doing their own thing. But in my Brooklyn community where I am,
you're starting something.
Yeah. So this is like a.
It seems to be, if it doesn't exist, you're gonna go build it.
Oh my God, yeah. Like, really, do I have to? But like, if you want something, I guess being in that hub really did wonders for my career.
Right.
And then I did another biennial cycle or two, and connections, and building up with artists, and they in turn recommended me to curators that they had at museums around the world. So before I get into the thing that I'm starting in Brooklyn, trying to replicate a little bit or start that road, once I moved back from Jerusalem to Brooklyn again, it was like a family decision. It's great for my kids to be around family and all that. So like that's where we were. But professionally, it's like hard stuff. Like it's not fair. It should be like that, but that's what it is.
Right.
And I reached out to artists that I had met in Israel, and I said, please, like, in this work remote world that we're all part of now, and work travels internationally. I know that, you send things, you bring stuff when you do your speaking engagements all the time. And I said, you could just do me a solid. You know my work, you know me. If you can vouch for it, if you have connections that, people that you work with that you think might be interested in the topics that I work on, I'd appreciate you just passing along my website, because that's all it takes sometimes.
Yeah. Yep.
The right person to give a recommendation. So there's an artist I also owe a debt of gratitude to. Her name's Andy Arnovitz. She's a fantastic conceptual artist in Jerusalem, really inspirational figure.
Right.
She's got 5 kids. She's got this full-fledged career. She's in university.
Right, but she's at the crossroads of all Jewish art.
She's really smart. She's really thoughtful. She makes great art.
Yeah.
And she was kind enough to introduce my work to a few curators that she worked with. And, I'm lucky that she agreed to do that they took the time to look through my site. They found stuff that they liked of mine, and they invited me to participate in group shows that they had in these past few years. The Jewish Museum of Vienna, the Jewish Museum of Berlin, who is themselves doing a collaborative show with the Jewish Museum of Amsterdam. So my work is traveling to all these different places now, and I almost feel like, not that it happened by accident, but like, not by my own, like, I had a lot of help getting there. But I guess, again, that interplay between, I had a lot of help getting there, but I had to have the stuff to back it up. So
no,
it's seeds.
Nothing we can't do anything alone. And the greater the network. And
very grateful. Very grateful.
I say the bigger the pie, the bigger the pieces.
Yeah.
We lift each other up and encourage each other. And
people also, like, I'm always happy to pay. If your work deserves it, if you're relevant to some opportunity, like, not every opportunity is for me.
Right.
So, like, I started a WhatsApp group of local artists. Well, I'll put in opportunities that come up all the time, because I'm like, hey, maybe I found this interesting, maybe you do too, and just post it, put it.
Well, the Jewish Art Salon has been this incredible, clearinghouse of opportunities that come through, but also, developing,
Just knowing there's a group helps you think, like with what Rami did about the biennial, just makes you think bigger about what could be possible, because, hey, I have people who will give me their listening ear, give me the resources, give me the platform. Maybe I'll raise my own. For my first show with them, I did all the fundraising.
Right.
Like, what was I, like 25 at the time? And, like, I'm talking to people and, like, stumping for this thing. My husband helped me. We raised $25K to, like, actually do this.
Wow.
Yeah, but, like, it takes a lot of people coming through and coming together, and very grateful to them. But yeah, so now, going forward in my artistic journey, I came back to Brooklyn, and I'm so happy I'm there. My family's thriving, and I love being with my family too. And, like, it's good, in a good place. I'm grateful for all those blessings, and even having a place to come back to. Given that, it's hard being a capitalist living in socialist Israel and all these different.
Right. Yeah.
Israel's a great dream, and it's ours, and we all have to help build it. But then there's
layers,
unexpected layers and challenges coming with that. So, okay, here we are, and it's good, it's great, but it's not so great for my career. And
being back.
Or not even for the opportunities and where things are going, because, again, remote, and, like, we're out there. Okay, like, I have a solo show at that museum in Italy coming up next year. Like, it's good on that front. Like, thank God, it's good. Except, like, in the day to day. So you do the typical thing. Okay, so I'm an artist, and I need to be working outside the house, or I will never leave my house, and I will go cuckoo, even more cuckoo than I already am.
Right.
I won't speak to people, and so I need to rent space and treat my career properly, like it's got an office, and I come into work like a person, and I rented a space in Red Hook for 2 years, which is, like, inspirational, and it's fun. It's, like, fun to tell people that you work in Red Hook, but, like, in practicality, what does that mean? It's a shared space. Maybe people are not always there, so I go into work. I'm the only one there. It's nice, it's private, but at the same time, it's really quiet.
Yeah, and it's lonely.
I could go days without seeing a person. I'm sitting there on the docks, like, yeah, I can see IKEA and all the shipping containers and the ocean, and, like, that's so cool. There's the Statue of Liberty every day, and, like, wow, but, like, that's, like, good for a storybook. It's good on paper. It's not good for, like, me, the person, and my ideas, and making these connections, and, like,
no, I have a similar struggle. I mean, I have this beautiful studio here, but I'm out in Hillside, New Jersey, and the only people that come visit are people who are scheduling to come visit. I don't have, you're all invited, but I don't have a lot of, walk traffic.
Right. And like, clarify, it's not about, like, because I don't want people buying my work, but it's not because, like, I want attention on my work necessarily. It's just, like,
having a community
and feeling like you're a part of something to encourage you and keep you going, or make you think about different things that you hadn't before, and you help others and they help you, and, like, you're going to just be bigger and better the more people you have involved in your career. You need colleagues. Every other industry has this, except for artists, unless you're part of some kind of hub. And I looked at my own community, and for a long time, this is almost part of the reason why I moved to Jerusalem in the first place, was because this is going to be great for my career, because look at all these things I can reach out and touch, and there's just nothing, there's no structure here. There's just nothing.
So you're saying I should move to Jerusalem for 2 years?
Yes. If your wife and kids are okay with it. Like, it was a great experience. We only gained from it, thank God. But
Right.
so now I look around and I'm like, okay, well, I'm 34. I'm not like a early career artist anymore that I have the experience and I've worked in spaces like this. And maybe traditionally my community wasn't leaning so heavy into like creating structure for arts, the fine arts and artists, because they didn't know how. It wasn't time. It was a new immigrant community. The first 100 years is not about like, let's think about conceptual art. It's like,
Yeah,
like,
that's
okay,
survival.
let's set up
Survival.
schools and houses and make sure like we're good. Now we're good. So maybe now the person that is supposed to do that is me.
It's us, is
Yeah.
our generation.
So
Yeah, Jewish art
yeah,
has flourished in the last
20 years in a
20
way.
years since we've started,
Yes.
and whenever that was.
Yeah, good
It's
timing.
definitely
Good
grown.
timing.
It's definitely evolved. There's a lot more people, and people start with cliche art, if you will, derivative, but
Right.
then we grow. Then we,
Yeah, if you stay at it long enough.
if you stay along.
So what's going to give me that persistence? The community.
Right.
Now I look around at my community, and also like in the last 20 years, there's definitely been like an uptick and a blossoming in the amount of people that look at art as a viable career or a creative career, or people who even will do it as a hobby, but like really involved and turn it into something
A
that,
serious,
yeah.
ongoing,
And
multi-year.
unfortunately, up until now, people who do get serious and have good ideas, like because there's no framework, they end up going to the city or to Gowanus, like other neighborhoods outside of our own. And that's a loss for the whole community, because even as not an artist, as the average person, it's like, well, maybe I want to go to an art event, but there are none around me. So now I have
Right.
to waste an hour commuting into the city.
Right.
And now by the time like they start at 6 o'clock, well, I have a family life. So by the time I can even walk out the door, like I already missed it. So I just won't go to things.
As you said, you got to choose. There's a lot of
Gotta
FOMO, but you got to
choose,
choose which
And it's
what
such a
to
struggle.
actually
Like, why should it
attend.
always
And
be fighting? Why should it be a fight? Like this is a nice part of life. It's just a pleasant part of being alive and being a person, is being able to like, yes, go to that concert, go to that artist talk, go like as not an artist. There's like,
Right.
I want to go to a drink and draw. I want to go see. There's like in Jerusalem they have this thing called Creative Mornings. They have it in cities all around the world where
yeah.
they'll get together on a Friday morning. They have AV equipment. Somebody will get together and present to the group. They have a breakfast. It's a networking event, and they'll just show like, this is my journey as an artist. This is what I work on. And I'm like, how pleasant is that? As
bringing the
just a
community
person
together.
attending, I like to have my brain fed a little bit once in a while too. And it's important to have that in your local community. Otherwise, it's like urban blight, right? Everything is a cell phone store and a food store.
Right.
And like, what are we doing?
Right.
For me,
Right.
it's like, okay. So I'm sitting there in Red Hook in my studio alone, and I just look around and I'm like, is there a better way to do this? Maybe it's me. Like maybe if I had a small space, are there other artists out there who would be interested in forming something like that together with me? I send out a sounding to all the artists in my area that I do know. There was interest. It needed a little tweaking. People can't commit to things because they've got so many other commitments and they don't want to be running something. And like you hope, maybe we can be a collective. Maybe we can make decisions together. Maybe we can like any one person wouldn't have to shoulder the whole burden of creating and running and being like on the dotted line about the thing. The answer is no. If you want it,
If you want it, you got to build it, and it
you gotta
seems like
do
you're
it.
building
It's
it.
gotta be your baby. I had some good advice from friends. Because it could be disheartening too. Like, okay, well, if no one's gonna help me, I don't know if I feel up to doing this. I don't know if I can.
Alone.
This big thing that Sippy has in Israel, but she built it slowly. You have to be reminded of
There's
that.
a story about this. I think it's like about a chicken trying to make bread or something like that.
Right. No one else is helping.
No one else is helping, but everyone's happy to. But
Everyone's
hopefully,
happy to share from it, right.
Right. Well,
I had a good advice from a friend because I was, this is months already that I'm working on this concept and trying to get it together. Maybe that's not a lot of time for other people, but for me, I'm a really impatient person. I'm like, well, I thought of this. This is a great idea. Here's all the ways it could work.
Come
Why
on,
haven't we done it already? Why isn't it done? What? It's not so hard. Get a room, put tables, put easels, invite people to let's go.
right.
So months I'm working on this, and I ups and downs. It looks like it's going to be possible, and you're 3 feet from gold, or no, it's not going to work. And should I just give up? And keep to my own thing, do what I've always been doing. It's a little lonely, but it kind of works, and just like it's fine. Stay the course. I had an artist friend of mine who was just like, listen, if you can't get it all at once in the biggest, best iteration, you're not going to have those creative mornings. You're not going to have a drink and draw. You're not going to have institutional support, and it's not going to be 3,000 square feet of space with all these different artists like teaming and doing their stuff.
Got to start somewhere.
Maybe you get one room. Maybe you have one person join you, and together the two of you can do an art event, and then it just grows because if it's compelling enough and it's a good idea enough. Again, being persistent, being consistent, eventually will it work. And I got really lucky because when I put out that email to like all the other artists I know, one of them happened to be involved with a music recording artist who has their own recording studio for many years, and they were looking to take space in Brooklyn. So they moved forward with that, and it's too much space, the place that they found. It's more than they need, so they're We're working now on, this is real, it's happening like this month right now. Like I'm leaving here and I'm going to take measurements.
And someone else is signing the lease.
Well, I still have to have the lease with them. Like money makes everything go around.
Right.
But it's enough that I can keep it going for about a year. So like, let's give it a chance to breathe and live. And if it's the right thing, then it can sustain itself
Evolve and grow.
that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try and give it wings and give it a chance. But yeah, I'm founding, like it's not really what I signed up to do. I do want to do this more, but this is important to me also, that artists need this
create the
space.
vessel. Yeah.
Artists need this space to come together. And people in the community need cultural offerings, things have to exist. And, you know, people like, I'd love to host you for one of those creative mornings and talk to people about the amazing things that you do, because everyone should know about it. Like, I'd love to be the vehicle for that. So we're going to give it a shot, try and see how it goes for a year.
Amen.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's called Muse.
Muse.
The website is musebk.com, where like the website's all set up, but I haven't renovated the space yet. So it's like all these stock photos. It looks like super great. It's like, it's not us yet. I think we're going to look more like this. I don't know. I got the month of August to kind of set it up, and we're going to open September 1. So South Brooklyn.
Okay. We'll put the info and the link in the bottom of the show notes.
I hope I have something to show for it soon.
I'm sure you will. I'm sure. So what are some of your dreams going forward as an artist? What are some projects that you're not currently working on, but you're thinking about that are down?
That's a very good question. I don't know. I think organically my ideas spring up depending on what's happening with me in life at that time.
Okay.
I found this cool, like it could be a new art supply that you hear about where you're like, oh, that would be great to work with, or like, hey, now how does this make my brain work differently, and think about what's possible. So, I mean, for right now, I'm really focused on this art space, and I think that bringing people together might drum up some new opportunities and ideas.
Absolutely.
I feel like I have not fleshed this out fully yet.
Okay. So you still got
so time intensive that I came up with like a few great ones. I executed them, but like bigger, bolder, better, different, on the ceiling.
Installation.
I found this cool fabric that's made of wires. Like this is really involved with twisting wire by hand, and it's single strands. And the structures I was making on the ceiling, I had to take individual long spool of wire and like make almost a net out of it and then shape it. So I found this cool material that is actually like a very fine wire woven. So you unroll it and you can shape it and it will hold the shape. So I'm like, okay, now we're next level.
That opens a whole new
avenue. So that's coming in the mail, along with a bunch of supplies for the Common Studio. It's like all these things running at the same time, and I hope I'll have time to work on them and invest. But like, also you got to be realistic. Like, if you're doing this right now, you want to focus on it and do it well. So like, give that a chance. I've got a show coming up, as I mentioned, with the museum. The city in Italy that has this Jewish museum is called Lecce, Lecce. So the Museo Ebraico in Lecce had a few group shows that I showed in with site-specific installations in the last 2 years, and they're asking me to do a solo show. So I've got something in concept that I'm working on, like as we firm up details about when it's going to be, am I going to fly out there for an event or to install it? I have this interesting concept that I want to work on of like the traditional scroll hanging calligraphy. If you go to the Met and like look at all the Asian galleries, they've got like the scrolls that could hang from the ceiling with this big, bold, beautiful just calligraphy. Because ultimately, all the conceptual stuff, it starts out with this like really strong base of calligraphy, like going deep into that, and it's always pulled me. So after October 7th, I was thinking a lot about how I'm sure you've had this sort of experience intellectually, emotionally, of like, I feel like I went through the looking glass. Up is down, right is wrong, black is white. People are like holding the Hamas flags in the streets like a rape banner, like, and you're cheering for them. These half-dressed people like cheering for like Hamas. Like, they don't like.
They have no idea. They have no idea.
On every level, just like cheering the rape of women, the murder of children, and saying that this is acceptable and good, and we should be defending their right to do that because it's justified because X, Y, Z. Like, there's a line, and we have crossed it a long time ago, and you just feel like you're living in this reflected version of reality it's terrifying, it's confusing, and it's just like you grow up like knowing like everyone believes they're the good guy, like you're on this side of like I am in the right, and then something like that of course makes you reevaluate and look at it because you've got a brain, okay, I want to hear the other side, what are they saying with it? And like, no, obviously I still come back to the conclusion that like rape and murder of children in beds is wrong. But a lot of people did not come to that conclusion, and so you look at that tension point, and you're like, But how could it be? How could good people who care about humanity, like, they're saying this by like, genocide and all this, they're concerned about the humanity of these people, but like they've completely erased the humanity of everyone else involved.
Yeah,
which
and
is
in
nuts.
the first few days, weeks after October 7th, I'm like, finally, the world can
Is going
see
to see.
good and bad,
Right.
black and white, clearly.
This is why we need all these walls and defense, and because of this, but still
and
they'll
yet
find
the
a way
world
to
is
subvert it
still,
and change it. And again, this reflective sort of just. So actually, I don't know if you've ever walked in the city by the MoMA. You're like, where am I going with this? The sign for MoMA is against, it's like almost like a scroll of calligraphy, and they've got their like big block printed MoMA logo on it.
Okay.
But the building itself is reflective glass. It's a giant window mirror.
Right.
So when you are approaching it from the side, like the MoMA logo is perpendicular to the building, and so it's reflected in the glass. And when you look up to it, I just noticed that it looks almost like an abstract tribal design.
Right. Okay.
So you're like, oh, it says MoMA. It's just I'm looking at the reflection. So
Right.
it coming and meeting itself makes this
Yep.
mirrored effect and makes something new.
Right.
So I had this notion of like, I really feel like we stepped through the looking glass and everything is so reflected. I'd love to make a scroll. You know, I use Arabic almost exclusively, but maybe for this one I would do like 3 scrolls, and one in Arabic, one in English, and one in Hebrew, because all those are 3 parts of my identity. And this show in Italy is supposed to be like a journey through me as an artist, but also in relation specifically to current events, because you have to not only talk about yourself all the time. So I'd love to see mirrors installed on a wall and these 3 hanging scrolls and having words in all these 3 languages like decency, truth, you know, just basic humanity stuff.
How they get reflected.
And have it reflected. So when you approach it, it's like, oh, wow, look at these beautiful swirling designs. I have sketches of them where I was, you know, drawing it and then drawing the reflection. So doing the calligraphy backwards.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I was like, well, let's not drive myself nuts. I think I could just hang up a mirror. I did do the backwards calligraphy in my sketchbook. I have it, but it was like, instead of trying to make it exactly mirror, like might be better served by actually putting up a mirror.
Right.
But then you get into these funny questions of like, okay, so who's supplying the mirror in this small town in Italy? Like, are you handling that, and how does all that work? Like, hopefully the museum can deal with that. But that's something I hope to work on. I have the paper ready, and just have to find.
You got a whole lot of. You got a lot ahead of you.
Always, the wheels are always turning.
Yes.
I don't sleep very well.
That's all.
Sleep when I'm dead. Okay. Yeah, you're trying to like just leave something behind, I guess.
Thank you. Yeah.
Right. That's like a thing for artists also.
Yeah, you want to like, we're here to make a difference. We're here to impact the world.
Make something that's gonna outlive me.
Right.
I can't help it. I think as an artist, like I get like pretty morbid. I think about death a lot.
I'm not old enough to think about.
Neither am I. I don't know where it comes from, but it's just like unbidden. Like, okay, you're making this thing. Well, okay, this will be there.
This will be there. Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
Hopefully, all the things that you put out into the world, or the ideas will outlive more than physical objects.
Amen.
So.
Amen.
Yeah.
So as we end each podcast with one question of what advice do you have based on all of your experience for young artists to find their orange socks, to find their uniqueness, their creativity, their expression?
So I actually have a really good answer, but it's not from me. It's from, of all people, Yoko Ono.
Okay.
Okay. I was on Twitter in the early days of Twitter. They had, the young man was like the Wild West where everyone was interacting with everyone because there weren't very many accounts on it, I guess.
Right.
Yoko Ono, or the people who run her account, had this like Friday feature where she would say, artists, send me in your questions and I'll actually answer it.
Oh, wow.
So this is way early. This is 15 years ago. So I put in my question was, you know, what advice do you have for a young artist who's looking to stand out? You know, I live in the city. Like, this is like
it's dime a dozen.
Big pond. Like, who am I? At that time, especially, like, I don't know anybody. This is totally nuts. This journey I'm starting. Well, what am I supposed to do? And she said something that maybe like was annoying at the time. But first of all, I was just so happy that she even picked my question.
Right.
But she said, you have to, basically, you do you. You have to, if you're trying to stand out and be unique in a sea of other people, so then you need to hone in, and this is how I took her answer, or how I interpreted and meant it. You need to hone in on the thing that is specifically yours, that only you can give the world. Because what's the point of you even making the stuff if not for that? Right. You know, if I'm going to make something that a factory in China could make, then what's the point of me?
Right.
What's the point of all those hours and does it? Think about something that you can uniquely contribute to the world, to the conversation, that because of your position and who you are, that only you could do. Go deeply into that and see where it takes you, because ultimately, if I'm going to try to be like this person or be like that person or do something in that style, so then, well, I'm always just going to be a copy of them.
Right.
And once you can find that unique voice, and like it's the work first. You know, I read the newspapers a lot, or I used to read the Wall Street Journal a lot. They always used to interview artists. So like that's one piece of advice that's always great is like always read these articles and interviews with the people who are successful because you should start to pick up good habits. Like, yeah, wake up at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. and like you get more time if you're being pressed for time is one of your issues, whatever, and a million other things. They had an interview once with Anish Kapoor where it's like felt really validated because it was something that I had already been thinking, but to see it expressed in words like that from someone who's so prolific and professional and widely collected, and it starts with the work. You have to have the work first because you can talk about your ideas and the things you're going to do and the things you want to do. You have to put in that time and you have to have stellar work. You need to be able to stand behind your work, your materials, your concept. It's got to be so tight, so good so that like you can go and present that front facing to the world. It's not that it will attract because you can make it and then like it will live in your basement. But if you're going to make something and then part of that is that then you're going to go present it to the world, you're going to apply to shows, you're going to try and make connections, you're going to go to a Jewish art salon event and be like, hey, this is me, this is what I do, get in touch if this is important for you, and you're going to hold up this like garbage thing. So then no one is going to get in touch with you because you don't deserve it.
Right.
So it starts with you and it starts with your work, and you've got to be so focused on making that the absolute best it can be. So there's no holes in it at all. Like this is complete for you, whatever that means. Then you can confidently go out and try to give it the best shot that it can get. Don't even bother before then, because like another thing, you only have one chance to make a good first impression.
Right. Okay.
So if you're going to go out and have those opportunities and like waste them because you weren't really ready, like don't rush it. Be patient. It's the long game. It's a slow burn. Like young artists are always like, why isn't it working yet? I was there, like well, I'm working so hard. My idea is great. Well, hasn't it happened yet? Well, hopefully you're going to be an artist a really long time. You're going to live a long life.
It does take time.
Really prolific and really productive. Not everything is an amazing idea. Not every opportunity is a pathway to something. Sometimes it is a dead end. It's just, so keep going. Don't give up. Just keep going and be out at things as much as you can and make it work.
Amen. Yeah. Amen. All right.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. No, this is fascinating. This is really.
You could ask an artist about themselves because they won't stop talking.
No, I think there's a lot of valuable ideas in here and lessons to be learned for myself and for others.
Hope so.
And hopefully we'll check in again before the next 15 years.
Yes. Amen.
Thank you.
All the best.
היום נעשה משהו בלתי נשכח